Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our monthly webinar. We're just having people joining us, so as we're waiting for more people to join, I'll run over some of the housekeeping, and then we'll get on to the main show as quickly as possible. So, my name's Richard. I'm an operations manager with Healthcare Improvement Scotland, and I'm delighted to be welcoming Will and Nicola from Chas, who are coming along to speak to us today on our topic. This is one of our usual monthly webinars that we host within Healthcare Improvement Scotland about lots of different topics to do with engaging with communities and people across Scotland. You can find out more on our website about upcoming events. We've got one next month on using medical drones for medical deliveries, and we've got something coming up in December about volunteering. So please have a look on our website, and you'll find out all the details on how to book. If you saw the housekeeping video that just at the very start of the session today, there's a couple of things that we've put in place. So we've turned off everybody's microphone and camera. That's to save the bandwidth and just make sure that the quality of the speakers is as good as it can be. We'll turn mics and cameras back on at the end when we've got a Q&A session. So if you've got a question or you'd like to make a comment, please put your hand up at that point, and we'll take your comments and questions then. We realise that sometimes a question occurs to you partway through the presentation, so rather than interrupting proceedings, if you can put your comment into the chat box at that point, we'll come back and pick it up during the Q&A at the end. We're also recording today's webinar, so we will have the recording available on our website within the next couple of days. So if you'd like to run back and see something or share it with a colleague, the link will be available within the next couple of days. If you've got any questions or any technical issues during the webinar, you can contact my colleague Linda, and her details should be appearing in the chat box, her email address, if you have any difficulties that you need help with. But without further ado, I'd love to hand over to Will McLean and Nicola Porciani from Chas, the Children's Hospice across Scotland, better known as Chas to most of us, I guess. And we're really looking forward to hearing about how they involved users of that service in a meaningful way when they were developing their strategic planning. So Nicola and Will, I hope you're there on the call, and I'm hand over to you now.
Hi everyone, thanks very much, Richard. Hi, my name's Will. I'm Programme Manager for Children's Hospices across Scotland, as Richard said, better known as Chas. Chas is a national charity. It provides specialist palliative care and hospice services for children from pre-birth up to the age of 21, and importantly for us, for their whole families as well. And today we're going to tell you a little bit about how we've involved all our stakeholders in strategic planning. But I think the best start for us is to hear from all those stakeholders, and we'd like to show you a video about Chas, just to give you a better understanding of who we are and what we do.
The doctor said, "Would you like to come to the hospice?" I thought they must be wanting her to go there to spend her final days.
In my mind, the hospice was very quiet, it was full of old people.
Just sad and dark, and everybody's upset, and in actual fact it wasn't like that.
The minute that you walked through that door, it was like this sense of peace. Gave you a big warm hug. This is my safe place. I can vent, I can have fun, I can be mum to Isla. Just purely mum, not nurse, therapist, teacher, trainer.
It was no longer a hospice, it was just a place to come and be part of a family who were going to look after us. Freya and I are not alone. We're in this together.
They got to know Aidan at the back of their hand, they knew.
And they would decorate his room. There's special pictures for him and things like that. I mean, there's the staff, there's the volunteers, there's the gardeners, there's so many people. I would love to thank everyone else.
We focus on memory making and maybe just making things a little bit easier for families.
There is lots of colour and lots of space for you to be you.
Families can be supporting them in the hospice, in the hospital or at homes, and it's about supporting these children and families through the journey that they've got ahead.
On a day we could be doing music therapy in the morning, assisting with that, or like virtual hospice music therapies. If the weather's really nice, then we utilise our amazing back garden. We're about living, and we concentrate on what you can do, not what you can't do. And you don't realise how important that is for families. That's what we're here to do.
The time that you cherish most is the time that Aidan passed. Because I think with them having the Rainbow Room, he was able to stay here and we were able to stay here with him.
We were being cared for and looked after. I can't describe the difference this place made to the start of our grieving process.
It gave you a chance to grieve, I think.
The thing about the staff here is they understand, they get it.
I am a bereaved sibling and I know how important those memories are. So knowing that our families have that chance and can go into the Rainbow Room and get their heads around it, help navigate through the darkest days.
Wished we didn't need Chaz, but my goodness, my life would not be as full if I hadn't had Chaz as that catalyst.
I think for me it's the comfort and it's the love. When Chaz at home come to the house, they also look after me and they look after the rest of the family. They're always going to be there for me, and I know that. They're never going to walk away.
More and more families are choosing to stay at home, particularly at end of life. Chaz is there for every family in Scotland. It's not a one service fits all. We're looking to provide support across the whole of Scotland to take services where they're needed.
Place where everybody understands.
Kind of like a family, an extended family.
They've been keeping the joy alive in our lives for so many years, and I know they will continue to do that.
Now, just checking, has that presentation come up there? If anyone could let me know. Great, thank you. So from the video there, you'll have seen that we have a wide variety of stakeholders, of people that are involved in the organisation, both in accessing our services and delivering them. And what we've been working on at the moment is creating our new strategic plans for 2024 to 2028. But to think about how we got there and why we did the work in the way that we did, I want to go back and just look at the way we created our previous two strategic plans in 2016 and 2019. So those plans were published in 2017 and 2020. So both of those plans began in the same way. Were supported by the University of Strathclyde, and Influence and Data was created for us by the University of York. And this was a really important stepping stone for us. We didn't have data about the need for our services across Scotland, and particularly the unmet need as well. So we began with Influence and Data, and if I'm completely honest, we did these strategies in a fairly traditional way. We started with surveys, questionnaires for our staff, our volunteers and families. We set up workshops, focus groups, we did interviews, we did some play and art with families and children, and of course we did external engagement with partners across Scotland as well. We took this data, refined it, and then that was again refined by our senior leadership team and our board of trustees. So together, this was all put together to make our strategic plans for 2017 and 2020. If I'm honest, it was difficult for children and families to properly participate, to properly get involved. We found that the closed questionnaires from the surveys and from our interviews and focus groups were challenging, and visioning exercises, thinking about where can we be in the next 3 to 5 years, were challenging as well, particularly for bereaved families who are struggling where they'll be in the next 3 to 5 days. What we did find, however, during this time was the facilitated conversations really worked. This is where families were able to get involved, to tell us their story, and where we found richer detail in what they told us and a deeper meaning in what they told us as well. And there was a paper created by the University of Strathclyde that really explained the importance of these facilitated conversations, and particularly the play and art for children as well, but for families too, and how that made our strategy making much more participative and inclusive. And it's really from here, from that finding, that we moved on to creating the piece of work that we're doing at the moment. And I'm sure many of you have seen ladders of participation. They all stem from the ladder of citizen participation created by Sherry Armstrong in the 60s. And the idea behind it is people move from care recipients to being active participants in the design and delivery of their care. So I've created a CHAS ladder, if you like, of how we wanted to move upwards on the ladder and increase the participation with our organisation. Maybe some of you have seen the New Economics Foundation did a ladder participation that was widely circulated, particularly in NHS and health and social care publications in the last few years. And their challenge was, can you go one rung up the ladder each time you do another piece of work? So we started off before that influencing data, really focusing on the presumed need of what we thought families wanted from our services based on our observations, anecdotal evidence. But what we found after the publication of the CHISP report was we were able to ask closed questions about personal experience and consult people on plans. But as I said, it wasn't entirely successful from a view of participation and inclusion. What we did find was asking people open questions about what matters to them worked. And we very much wanted to involve people in design. And this is really how we took the view of how we'd move forward this new piece of work we're doing in developing our new strategic plan. So it's a bit of a hybrid model. We do want to involve people in the delivery of the strategy when it's complete, but for the actual creation of it, we wanted to ask open questions and we wanted to involve people in the design of our new strategy. So we're really combining a couple of different ways of working there, a sort of inquisitive approach about asking people, but really using people's experience in designing and delivering the plan. So there are a number of challenges involved in that, and I'm going to hand over to Nicola to explain what we faced and what we faced in the past and involving children and families.
Thank you, Will. So there's a number of challenges, as Will said, when we're looking at this. For me, one of the main challenges is just family life for the families that we're working with. All families, not just CHAS families, have hectic lives, and the juggle of different ages and interests and works and education and appointments in the day-to-day and the now and again drama or crisis can make life so hectic. But for the families that we support at CHAS, they have a hugely multi-layered, complex days that one mum recently described to me as spending years organising each day with military precision to allow her to do just about everything she needs to do to care for her child with complex medical, emotional and physical needs, and then herself and the rest of her family as well. This is one of the biggest challenges for us at CHAS when we involve families in the design of our services. We might have families that want to take part, but how they have the time and the energy it can prove challenging. For our families, seeking childcare for a child with complex needs is very different to have granny look after your active wee one for a couple of hours. There's not many grannies or aunties that are trained in ventilators or suctioning or what to do if a child has a seizure. or if it's a 14-year-old that needs support with toileting. So the weight and the worry of someone else looking after your child whilst you participate is huge, and can really sway whether a parent can take part in whatever it is we're looking to do. And also when they do have that time, it has to be time well spent as well. We might also get to that point where we've arranged support for a family and they're getting involved, but circumstances can change so quickly for families. Unlike anybody, they can be day-to-day emergencies, cars break down, parents are unwell, or for our families, there can be a sudden change in their child. A child who's been very stable can suddenly become very unwell. And how do we deal with that as well in those circumstances? And with all of that brings exhaustion for parents. They're exhausted from the day-to-day. Caring for this very sick child is consuming, and having energy to participate is also a particular challenge within family circumstances. Geography and location, we support families throughout Scotland. It's not possible for us to have one location that we can gather all families. You can keep me right, but what if we've got 32 local authorities, 14 health boards, so all of our families are within all these areas. Our families are in islands, they're in farms, they're in villages, they're in high-rise buildings, they're in tenements, cities and towns and suburbs. All of those come with their own unique challenges in terms of how we engage with families in different areas. And then some of our other challenges could be around different voices. It's really easy for me to speak to the most willing of families, some of the most articulate of parents or children, but how do I ensure that I listen to not just the most confident or the loudest or the most able voices, but like all engagement, the challenge of ensuring anyone who's less likely to voice their opinion or not sure if they should or if they can or if what they have to say is relevant. Another challenge is around communication, and there's different ways that we can look at that as well. So all the versions of communication, so how we communicate with our parents is crucial. We can see that some of our younger parents have very different choices in terms of how they want to be contacted and what their preferences are to maybe our older parents or grandparents. And that's also assuming that families have the ability to interact with the online world fully, when, where and how they want to, and whether that's due to perhaps digital poverty or that the Wi-Fi in Lewis is patchy. So we've got all those challenges around sort of the technical side of how we communicate with families. But in how we communicate on a human level will present challenges as well. We might well have parents who maybe don't comprehend or communicate English fluently, so how do we do that? We also have the diversity of needs of the children with hugely different communication needs and requirements and preferences. Some of our children would be described as non-verbal, but you definitely know when they're not happy about something. Some children are registered blind or deaf or are neurodivergent. How we communicate and what we want to ask or what we want to find out, and how do we do that without influencing their views and their answers is really important as well. And then amongst all that, woven throughout is trust. People need to trust us. So if families don't trust what we're doing or what we're asking, we sort of fall down at the first hurdle. Excuse me. And at times we will be asking or looking to find out some really deeply personal or emotional feelings about different things that we do at Chas. And you can see from the videos just some of those things that they might be. And some families are just, as we've said, as I said earlier about the first one, the family life, families are exhausted. So to be able to trust somebody in amongst all that exhaustion, that they're not repeating the same story, that they need to be heard and trust that they're going to be heard as well. So that's some of the challenges that we face. Thanks, Will. I'll hand back to you.
Thanks, Nicola. So yeah, as Nicola said, there are a number of challenges we have to face when doing this piece of work, but we did know that we wanted to increase the number of children and families that were involved in this piece of work and increase their participation as well. So The approach we chose was called Most Significant Change. Now, it's an evaluation approach which identifies what matters most about an organisation or a service or a project by collecting personal stories of change. Now, the most important part of this approach is looking at change from the perspective of all stakeholders. And you've seen in the video at the start, we have a large number of stakeholders of the people that deliver our services, but the staff and volunteers that deliver services, the people that access our services, our partners across the public sector. We wanted those perspectives as part of what we do. And as part of Most Significant Change, all stakeholders need to be represented in the process, have a say in the development and delivery of what you're doing, but as well as be involved in making recommendations, taking action based on the findings. So the reasons for choosing this approach, I mean, it's very participatory. It allows you to involve everyone involved in your organisation in designing, delivering and deciding on what you do. And that makes it very democratic. It gives you the ability to allow everyone to have an equal say, regardless of background and regardless of involvement in the organisation as well. One of the important things that we felt was its flexibility. So you're able to choose the data collection techniques that you're going to use. And I'll speak about that later, but we did choose storytelling and visual art just simply because we wanted a methodology where children, and particularly younger children, and as Nicola said, children with perhaps communication difficulties, with very complex medical needs, disabilities, they could be involved as well. So that was really important to us too. Considering what we do as an organisation, what we wanted was a safe space for everyone to talk openly and feel that they could share what we knew would be very hard to hear stories and very difficult stories. So it had to be a safe space where we could listen to the unmediated voice of people and not change anything they said and not sort of put our own voice on that. And importantly, for developing a strategy, Most Significant Change identifies what is changing and why that's happening. So you're able to identify outcomes and you're able to identify how those outcomes come about, the activities that help those happen. So just as a fairly overview of how it works, there's a few simple steps. And I must admit, it's not a very difficult approach to do. You establish an evaluation group who design, deliver the study, make recommendations and take action afterwards. And I'll explain a bit who's in that group later. You collect personal change stories of significance. And as I said, you can do that in your own way. And for us, that is going, and Nicola will show some examples of this, that did include a number of different ways of collecting visual art. So you undertake initial analysis of the stories that you've collected to identify the ones that matter the most. What matters the most to people about that service? And then following that, there's a secondary analysis to start working out what the outcomes are, what's contributed to those outcomes, and what action you should take. And that is the last part. Take action based on your findings. And it's the evaluation group that's set up that makes these recommendations. And that for me is the most important part of Most Significant Change. The evaluation group designs the entire evaluation. It's flexible and we can adapt it to our needs. So our evaluation group is going to collect and analyse stories along with artwork from children, decide from this what best reflects CHAS, take action based on those findings. So to do that, the evaluation group had to represent the whole of CHAS and have representation from across the whole of the organisation. So that evaluation group that we set up included parents with lived experience, parents and a sibling with lived experience, staff who delivered direct care, so we had nurses and staff from our family support team, and then staff from support functions across CHAS. So that includes things like fundraising, our quality and care and assurance team. And then really importantly for us, as a charity, we involve volunteers. So we have volunteers in our evaluation group too, and that includes volunteers with professional experience of what CHAS does, but also volunteers with lived experience of the death of a child too. So the last group that's on there is our information management team. Now, they were part of that evaluation group, but we did have support, direct support from them. They helped with that secondary analysis I mentioned. They helped with some of the data analysis and the validation, but they also kept us right on, obviously, the information governance around the work we were doing too. So really importantly for this, everyone had an equal say within this group of what happened. Everyone's contribution was important and valued. And the parent and sibling on the group, as well as the volunteer with lived experience, had very important context around what we would find, and our understanding of it was improved by having them as part of this group. So one of the big decisions that we had to make at the start was how we would collect the stories. And we wanted to collect the stories in a standardised way, in a way that was safe and easy and open. So we decided to use liberating structures as part of that. So just want to do a quick poll here just to see if we can understand that how many people have used liberating structures before. So quite a lot, moving there, quite a lot of no's there. So liberating structures, I'll give you a bit of background into it. It's a set of 33 really easy to learn and easy to use methodologies to engage people and to increase participation. We were really interested in these because what we found was the principles of liberating structures really resonated with what we wanted to do. So if we look at some of the principles, include and unleash everyone, which is a really interesting way of putting it, but we did want to be as inclusive as we possibly could. We wanted to have respect for people, not only that were on our evaluation group, but who were going to tell us change stories about some of the most traumatic times in their life. And we wanted to build trust in them so they felt able to tell us those stories, but also trust within our evaluation group as well, so they could have that ability to feel empowered to make the decisions that they would have to as we moved on with this. And that's really important, that self-discovery within that evaluation group as well, that we would learn how we would work together as we moved on. And then that last one there around seriously playful curiosity, I'll say this a few times throughout this, is that we're a children's charity, and as a children's charity, we should be thinking around that playfulness and having an approach and evaluation that can include children was really, really important. So we looked at the liberating structures, and the one that we chose was appreciative interviews. Now, appreciative interviews is a really simple way of asking a question, which is pretty much, well, tell me a story about. Appreciative interviews allows the storyteller to start at a place of strength, and it helps develop strategies to move forward. And that's very much what we're wanting to do here. We're wanting to create a strategic plan for Chas for the next 4 years. But appreciative interviews, because it's an open dialogue, it handles complexity really well. It allows people just to speak in their own time and in their own way. And an interesting part of appreciative interviews is it reveals the importance of the story through a title. And you ask storytellers to really highlight what their story means through the title that they give to it. So there's quite a few people on the call there that haven't used liberating structures before. So shameless plug here for the Liberating Structures Scotland group. It's a group where you can find out more about how liberating structures work, but also test them out in a fairly safe environment. There's regular meetings and regular ones. So there's a couple of links in the chat, and the next meeting in the Liberating Structures group in Scotland is on the 28th of November. So there's opportunity for you to learn more, but also to test them out too. And they are very useful for participation and for involving people. So with liberating structures, we took the appreciative interview and the evaluation group together. We tested it out, and as we tested the structure itself, we developed 3 fairly simple questions that we wanted to ask our stakeholders. So when you consider we're creating a strategic plan here, this is as simple as it gets. These are the 3 questions that we ask for children. We ask, let's make something that shows people what you think about Chas. And that was up to the child, what they wanted to do, draw or paint. Whereas for families and older brothers and sisters, we simply asked them to tell us about an important time when Chas helped you and your family. And that gave them the opportunity to speak and for us to listen. And then finally, for our people, our staff and volunteers and our partners across the public sector, we simply asked them to tell us about a meaningful moment in your experience with Chas. So as we worked through that liberating structures idea, we created collection templates and we gave participants the opportunity to respond in the way that they felt most comfortable. So that could be a face-to-face interview, it could be done online, it could be done through social media. We have a closed Facebook page where families can get involved, it could be done in a group, it could be done written, taken away and handed back to us. It was really an opportunity for families to do this in their own way. But however they responded, we collected all the responses together, anonymised them, transcribed them based on what we'd worked out around our information management. And just really on a word of that before we go on, it was really important that we got this right. We really had to understand what we were asking of children and families and make sure consent was in place. And that included consent for some very young children here as well. So we worked on what our data storage and privacy should be, how we would use that data, how we would share that data, and we would explain all of that to the families and all our stakeholders before we started, so they knew what we were doing, why we were doing it, and how we were going to use their private data as well. And one challenge that we did come up with that we had to work on was around access for all members of our evaluation team, because many of them weren't Chas employees, so we had to ensure that we got that right as well, and they could safely share the data that we collected from children, families particularly, but all our stakeholders too. So with all that in place, that allowed us to begin that data collection, and I'm going to hand over to Nicola, who's going to explain about how we did that with children.
Thanks, Phil. If you could pop up the next slide, that'd be great, thank you. So as Phil said, we did this in a number of ways with our children. So for our younger children or our children with more sort of complex needs or requirements, we did this in lots of ways. Now, it looks like we might be torturing a child on the floor, but we're not. So what we used here was our music therapist with a young lad who is registered deaf or hear impaired, and he does a lot of his communication through sound and through vibration, and so through chatting to him or through the use of music, we were able to, or the staff were able to talk to to communicate with him on his likes and how he could actually get involved with different things within Chas. Other young children, we used lots of different things to do with writing and craft work and making things, and you can see here some of the things that they wrote on love hearts. So really simply ask them, what do they love about Chas, or what does it make them feel? And you can see from some of the hearts here, it's home from home, it's special, it's fun, it's the whole family. So we've got some really rich information there just from something really simple. Some young people or younger children worked on beautiful pieces of artwork that included lots of glitter and glue and the usual bits of arts and crafts. Well, if you could pop on the next slide, that would be super. And then for one of our other pieces of work within this, we looked at what that journey looked like for young children within Chas. So when they come to Chas or Chas comes to visit, we designed a backpack that was what was their ultimate Chas visit, or what would be their ultimate Chas at home visit. And that would open up into like the front of the backpack would open up. It was really important to get the involvement of staff and involved in that, because myself and Will can't collect all of this information on our own, and it meant that Chas at home could go out to homes with a piece of paper and some pens and glue and different bits of artwork. So with some clear information for staff in terms of what we were looking for them to do, and also some guide for the children to get involved. And all we asked was on the front of the backpack that they could decorate it and make it their own. And then when they opened up the backpack, they would pop in anything that meant something to them in terms of Chas, whether it was something they loved or something they would love to see happening within Chas. We also printed out a lot of sort of pictures and different things they could use that really represented the children that we worked with. And particularly for some of our nurses, they've said themselves that, you know, they're highly trained nurses but give them glue and glitter and they're absolutely terrified. So we gave them the resources to work and using a family home where they weren't creating a big mess. Then there were some really useful things they could use there and pictures they could cut out and glue on, and children could pick the images that they liked, or a child would decorate and design themselves. We also did this in-house in the hospices, so when children were staying, the backpacks were sitting out in the art rooms for children to come up and do at any point. So that was a lot of our children that are younger and children with sort of more complex needs or needed a little bit more support. Our next slide is about how our older children, so more of our teenagers and our our siblings that are teenage siblings, and how we did that. And we actually attended a lot of the events that we had planned over the summer. So this shows a group of our teenagers at Whiston Lodge, which is somewhere that our teams sometimes go and stay, and they do lots of outdoor activities. It lets them be together with other young people who are going through something very similar. We attended to support and ask those young people, what does Chas mean to them? What do they enjoy about it? What more can we do? And yeah, we didn't use a backpack because that really wouldn't have worked for a group of teenagers, but actually it was sitting down, having conversations and being guided by them. Sometimes they painted a picture or they drew something out or they wrote long lists. At first we had to coax it out a little bit, but I think we ended up with, I think there was a group of 6 at one of the events, and we ended up with, I think it was like 103 different themes that they wanted us to look at. So once we got them starting chatting, so we use lots of different ways to gather information from our children and young people. Thanks, Will. And then the storytelling, as Will has said, sorry, Will, this is a really lovely one here. Hopefully you can actually see it. And Will and I just love this because we do love the wee spelling mistakes, but I think it just sums up what Robin House and what Chas means to them, that I have friends at Robin House, that I have met new people. I have not been there in a while and I miss it a lot. Playing games and music, colourful, happy, exciting. It is it's a rainbow in the sky. So there's lots of things within there. So actually some of the storytelling and the images that we got just explained what Chas meant to lots of our children. Thanks, Will.
So with that data collection in place, we began the initial data analysis. So we agreed the evaluation criteria between the group, and that involved a very simple scoring of the stories based on what matters most to a family being 5, what matters least being 1. With that criteria agreed, we shared, we read those stories between the group, we agreed the ones which mattered most. And there was a transparency in there around the whole group as well, so we're sharing everything, but that data is anonymised. And once we were happy with the 5 stories that we chose, we did submit those to the next level in the organisation. So that's our senior leadership team and our board of trustees. And they would agree that this is where Chas should be going, the direction of the organisation. Just a note on our board of trustees, they're all volunteers, but it does include a significant proportion of family members. So there's bereaved parents on there, as well as brothers and sisters too, all with lived experience of what Chas does. So once that full direction of the new Chas plan was identified, we undertook our secondary data analysis. And this is where we had some support from our information management team. We undertook 3 different analysis. The first was thematic, so that is identifying the key themes in the data, and that would go on to form the structure of our plan. We've used very simply word frequencies to understand the number of times words were used, particularly collating all the stories and children's artwork which we coded and gave words to. And we used just simple word cloud generators to do that. There's one on the screen there. And we also use sentiment analysis as well. This is where you would use machine learning. And I'll talk about that in a second. So what we find here is that we take an extra layer of analysis on the stories that we have. Most significant change is very qualitative, so it doesn't support numerical reporting very well. So what we wanted to do was to add in a form of numerical reporting as well. We were able to link a number of the stories that we got to numerical data, such as location, time with Chaz, things like that. But what we did find is that we are able to adapt the technique, and there's a good example in the chat around how that works and how we would do it. So the last thing we did was the sentiment analysis. And I just want to check again, has anyone used sentiment analysis before? So you'll see a poll coming up there. Has anyone used sentiment analysis in any of the work? So quite a lot of no there. So just as a little bit of background, sentiment analysis is a field of AI that enables machines to understand and interpret human language and determine what the emotional tone is of that piece of text. So to reference this, I asked an AI, and you can see on the screen there the response I got to give me an example of sentiment analysis in healthcare. So what sentiment analysis in healthcare does is it measures patients' perceptions about the care and treatment experience, about the kind of service they want to receive. It's about examining feelings, emotions, attitudes, and it helps providers analyse patient feedback to understand where their practice could improve. So there's different ways of doing it, and there are different types of sentiment analysis. We used one that's called a lexicon-based analysis, where you take a piece of text, so we took all the stories and all the words from children and referred them to predefined dictionaries of words. Now, we used 3 different lexicons to avoid bias, and we were able to generate scores based against the polarity of the words used, so either positive, negative, or neutral. So I'll talk a little bit more about those findings, but just before I do, I want to show that the amount of families and children that got involved, 137 different unique families across Scotland. That included 60 family members, so children over 12, parents, wider family members, and 77 children. And they were very representative of us as a national organisation, covered majority of health boards, 28 out of the 32 local authorities. 45% of respondents lived in Scotland's most deprived areas, and 5% for an ethnic minority background. So it covered very much what we do as an organisation. So just looking at our findings, through that word frequency, we found common words and themes. These are the top 10 words used by children and families, and their correlation was around those 4: time, family, staff, and love. But when we add in our people and partners, the correlation of time and family comes in there as well. And in fact, time was the most used word through all our participants. And I think that was maybe a bit of a surprise for us, because it was more of a concept around time being short, a child having a short life, a short time together, time as a family, time with professionals, time after death in the Rainbow Room, a heartbreaking time. Time came up from everybody and was really, really important. What we found from families were a number of themes, that finding out that learning that your child is seriously ill and may die young is really challenging and traumatic, and so is a referral to Chaz. And that trauma continues throughout life, that life is very complex and tough, caring for a seriously ill child. And the 11th word out of those top 10 was the journey, and Chaz is there on that journey to support families. And families told us that choice is really important, but particularly when a child dies. Trauma was really prevalent through the stories, and that's particularly true when we saw a correlation between poverty and trauma. Poverty was a significant part of family life before, during and after the death of a child. So 47 of those 60 stories from family members described instances of significant trauma. In fact, they described 83 instances of trauma. And the level surprised us, but that was particularly concentrated in families living in our most deprived areas. So 72% of the traumatic events happened in quintiles 1 and 2. And these events included the death of a child, but they also included significant life-changing and life-threatening illnesses of direct caregivers, life-limiting mental health problems of family members, financial distress, homelessness, suicide, separation of parents, addiction and alcohol problems, and the bereavement of very close family members. The death of a child is a commonality across the quintiles, but those in quintiles 1 and 2 experience much higher instances of trauma. And I mentioned earlier the power in the title of a story. So these are the titles given by some of the stories by families. And on the left, you can see that those living in the most deprived areas had very negative emotions at the start of their story, and the title reflects that, whereas the least deprived areas were more positive, and they were more around making magical memories before the child died. And as I mentioned, the sentiment analysis, we were able to show that at the start, where families felt sad, scared, desperate and confused and fear, we were able to find the positivity in those. And 3/4 of the stories that included significant trauma were given a positive score during the sentiment analysis. And we were able to understand what was causing that, what activity was helping families. And as one family member called it, what was giving them the strength to carry on. So that was our finding from families. Traumatic, very challenging, but I'll hand over to Nicola to explain what we found from children.
Thanks, Phil. Yeah, our children, mainly because parents keep it all going and keep the wheels all going, that life is lovely for them, and a lot of that trauma, they try not to have that happen within their lives. But in coming to Chaz, what we were hearing was quite different, that life is full of fun, it's laughter, it's happiness. There's also, which is hugely important, is that sense of inclusion. Children might not have used those words, but they would use drawings and storytelling or select images that showed that. It's a place where children can be children. It's where they can make friends, and where they can make friends with children who are going through something similar and have their BFFs and all these things that are really important. The next slide shows some of the images. Well, you should be able to press play, I think, and it will just take you through some of the different things that that we did with the children. So it shows some of the backpacks and of things that are important to children, and some of the storytelling. So Robin House is great, new friends, and things that they mean to them, soft play. So it's all about children being children, which is hugely important. I should move on to the next image within these. There's a little video with different images from the backpacks. Other backpacks showed things that they wanted us to be doing with them. We have one young lad who is rugby daft, and basically his backpack was full of everything to do with rugby, meeting rugby players, getting rugby balls, playing rugby at every opportunity. So these were really clear that these are things that we'll be doing within the hospice, particularly for this one young lad. Some of the other backpacks were beautifully decorated on the front, and again we're about that inclusion and friendship and fun. I don't know, Will, is the video shown or is it not happening for us? You're on mute.
Oh, no, it's not.
It was going too well, wasn't it?
I know. Do you want me to move on to the next one?
Yeah, let's do that. Sorry about that, folks. The backpacks are lovely. So our next slide just shows again in a sort of word cloud the different things that, again, these words that came up. So Robin House is really fortunate. We have a hydrotherapy pool that is hugely important. Anybody who takes a child swimming knows it's a lot of work. If you've got a child, with complex medical needs, going swimming is so challenging, and also it's also very cold. So the pool at Robin House is lovely and warm. Families can spend time together. So it's one of the most important aspects of the hospice, and being together as a family. But again, it's allowing children to be children. It's allowing them to access things that other children are doing. Other things that are coming up there, that inclusion and adaptive. Again, these weren't necessarily words that children had used, but it came out through their stories, it came out through their artwork, it came out through their backpacks, about showing them doing things that other children are doing. One mum told us of a story of her son who is no longer able to attend school. He's of that age, sort of primary 7 going into first year, and all his friends that he used to have at nursery are starting to get their hair done short, or starting to look cool, whereas her child is at home with her mainly 24 hours a day, because he's no longer able to go to school. She told of when he goes to the hospice of feeling normal, and these are the words that she used, that when he is there, he's with other children, and that's hugely important. And one highlight for her was the simplest of activities, where he was lying on the grass in one of the hospices alongside another child, and that he was just feeling the sun on his face and the grass in his hands and on his feet, and being with another child. It's about that normality that they were saying to us. So that inclusion and that play is hugely important to our children, but also it's hugely important for parents and carers to see that happening as well. Our next slide should show a little bit of that as well, I think. So this is Christopher. Again, we don't get to do this again. It's about letting children be children no matter what. He doesn't particularly like getting paint on him, but as you can see, he's got plenty of paint on him, on his wheels, and allowing him to use his chair to decorate his backpack and be really creative with it, which was just so lovely. And again, for family members and for staff to see the absolute joy as well is just is perfect as well. So it does a lots of things within that one activity. And then our next slide, again, it's these words that came over time and time again from children. They love being there, they love seeing their friends, they love being with their family. It's safe, it's happy, it's people are kind, they're making friends. Again, these are all the words that children used or drew or spoke about in different conversations as well. It's the care and the kindness. So again, it's about how they feel, what it feels like to them to use Chaz. Thanks, Will.
Thanks, Nicola. And then the last stakeholder is the people, and their stories very much correlated with what children and families told us. The impact of a child dying is their motivation, that they build resilience, which we've seen from the sentiment analysis, and they're inspired by the strength and courage in children and families. So I suppose with all that data collected and analysed, the big thing is the so what. So we are able to create our plan based on what children and families have told us. So these 3 junctures that family mentions in the quote on screen of learning your child is seriously ill, living well and dying well in bereavement are the areas where the family said that we need to be, that we could do more, and where our activities support those positive outcomes. And what we're able to do from this is create a structure of our new plan based on those 3 junctures, with outcomes that were written by children and families using their words. And we know the activities that they have identified that support those positive outcomes. So, I mean, this is a work in progress just now. We're working at the moment on the targets and KPIs that will make us know if our plan has been successful by 2028. And just want to give you just a flavour of the outcomes that we've developed under those domains. So you can see the words that are mentioned are highlighted there. These are words that children and families have told us, and these are the outcomes that they want to experience through the delivery of our new strategic plan. So I really just want to leave you with just some of our learning around this engagement. What we found is that this open dialogue has a number of advantages. It explains why change happens and why. And it helped identify what's really valuable to children and families, but also to our other stakeholders, our staff too. involve everyone, and really importantly for us, it involves everyone regardless of ability or disability, but also in our case, age. It really created a safe space where children and families were able to get involved, to talk and to share. And it empowered everyone really to think about their engagement with Chas and what that meant. However, it wasn't without its limitations that it's possible that you can lead to positive change and bias towards that by collecting stories using appreciative techniques. It doesn't support quantitative analysis at all, and you do have to think about how you can add that in. We were working on our next strategic plan, so we wanted to engage as many people as possible, but that can be time consuming. If you did this smaller, it would be less so, but what we did take a while. The use of liberating structures was because it needs facilitation skills, especially, and I've put that one beside a safe space, especially if you're dealing with personal stories of change that are challenging and traumatic. And there's, of course, the danger that stories are used elsewhere. And, you know, across the organisation, people wanted to use these for perhaps fundraising or in reports. But I refer that back to our privacy at the start that we agreed with families as well. And the last thing to think about is this requires a secondary analysis. And I don't really know if that's an advantage or a limitation, but it sits somewhere between. For our point of view, we were fortunate to have support from our information management team to undertake thematic analysis and sensitivity analysis. So it adds to the flexibility, but if you don't have those skills available, it becomes challenging and it does become time consuming as well. Now, we mentioned at the start the challenges involving the children and families that access their services. So I'm going to pass back to Nicola just to finish us off with whether we met those challenges or not.
Thanks, Phil. Yeah, so, well, if you could just pop up all the challenges and I'll take through, because I'm conscious that some people are short of time as well. So the complexities of family life, for me, that is always at the forefront. If we're setting out any kind of planning or engagement with families, I have to have that knowledge and understanding. So no matter what I'm doing, I'm trying to ensure that in some way, how can we enable a family to take part in some kind of participation? Is it ensuring care for the child, or is it a volunteer driver to pick them up? So how do we do it? Do we tap it into something else we're already doing, so we're not giving families additional things? The geography and location is always going to be a massive issue for us because it's Scotland and that has its complications. But again, it's looking at people individually and what we can do. It takes more time, but it's more important that we get those voices. And it's the same for every single one of these. We have to look at it for each of these challenges, and how do we actually make sure that those families that want to take part, and how it's not a one size fits all. So how do we address that for each family? Communication, I think you can see through our different uses of storytelling backpacks, meeting in groups, chatting to individuals, interviewing parents, that we've tried in as many different ways, whether that's going to families or whether it's meeting on a Zoom meeting or giving them a phone call or text messages. Will has learned a whole new vocabulary in emoji speak. So it's just finding the right ways of communicating with people. And if you're not getting it right, try and change it and do something else. And that trust, if we're doing all these things and demonstrating all these things that we genuinely want to hear from families, that trust will come there. But for me, I build up the relationship with staff that know the families better than I do. And sometimes it's about that staff member introducing me to that family so they know that I'm a trusted person that they can speak to, and that I'm going to really carefully take care of what they're telling me, and that we're going to use that to have some meaning and purpose. So they're not standalone. We can't fix one sometimes without looking at the other. They're all really sort of, it's more like a tapestry of challenges. But I think we've met a lot of them, and we'll always have these within Chas, but we're always aware of them. But yeah, I'll hand back to you, Will.
Thanks very much, Nicola. So that's us. Thank you all very much for listening. I'll just stop sharing there. And yeah, really happy to hear any questions. Sorry, we've ran over a little bit there, but yeah, happy to hear any questions or thoughts anyone has.
That was brilliant. Thank you so much, Will and Nicola. And hopefully you'll get a chance to look through the chat afterwards. The the amount of positivity and appreciative comments that have been for both what you've shared with us today and the service of Chas as a whole. I think the service you provide has resonated with a lot of people on the call today, whether directly or through extended circumstances. So I think there's so much positivity for what you've done. We've absolutely run out of time, unfortunately, for questions. One of the things I was going to ask that somebody had mentioned was about the timescale. How long does this? I think there's an investment of time in doing this properly, but how long did that take from start to finish?
It was around 12 weeks. So what we did with the 60 stories, we were sharing around 10 every week for 6 weeks. And we did that virtually, but then we had face-to-face meetings as well. But for the whole thing, about 12 weeks to do it. But like I say, this is our strategic plan for the next 4 years. So we're prepared to invest that time.
And actually, you can achieve a lot in quite a short space of time. I know 12 weeks when you're doing it is a lot of time, but actually for the importance of the work, it's time well spent as well. I think for me, it's been an eye-opener that I don't know an awful lot about engaging with young people or engaging at end-of-life services, but I think there's lots of what you've talked about is directly applicable to engagement across the pieces, but understanding the people and individuals as people, not as users of a service or not as somebody who's just there to tick a box. So I think it's been incredibly rich, the examples that you've shared, and there's been lots of interest in some of the tools that you've referred to as well. So I know there'll be people clicking on the links after this call. As I say, we're going to share the recording on the website, and hopefully people will come back and be able to share that on with other colleagues as well. We've got a couple of questions about feedback. We love to hear what people have thought. So if you're able to stay on for a minute or two, there's going to be some questions that are going to pop up on screen. If we have missed if there's been some questions that you've put in the chat that we've not been able to get to, we'll review those afterwards and we'll try and get an answer for you that we can share by email or in another way after the call as well, if there's something that we can do. But thanks so much, everybody, for taking part, especially Nicola and Will, especially to you for sharing your story, and indeed all your colleagues and the children and the families who've shared all of those insights that you've shared today. It's been absolutely fantastic to hear it, and thank you so much for your time with us today.
Thanks very much, Richard. Thank you.